just know that we don't usually start
Very,
this
very
late.
true.
Okay.
It's very, I tried it. I tried it.
Okay. So the biggest question we've always had is about hamtaka, about sweetening. And we said last time that these parashot, starting from Shmot, but particularly Vayera, Bo B'Shalach, you could say that they are the example in Torah of Achnav Dalam Taka, of submission, separation, sweetening. What's the main thing that the Torah heals us, or what's the main healing process that we saw in the Torah? It's that a nation of servants is healed from their servitude, from being in bondage in Egypt. And they become a free people. But like we said, the sweetening is supposed to be that from being a slave to the Egyptians, or from being a servant who's serving the interests of men, and not just men, but maybe the lowest culture that ever existed morally on earth, the Egyptians, we become the servants of God. That's the sweetening. We said that the sweetening didn't fully happen because the people ran away from Egypt, meaning they weren't able to completely reach the perfect state of sweetening. But if the sweetening would have happened, what they would have seen is that all the difficulties that they had endured in Egypt were actually setting the base and the groundwork for becoming a servant of God. You have to enter into the state of mind of a servant before you can become a servant of God. There's like a progression. The sweetening is always, like we said, it's that I have a negative quality and I want to elevate it to a positive quality. I want to turn it into something positive.
Is it always every single element transformable? Or is there some...
There's some things that are, we'll see today the whole process, how it works. But sometimes in order to fix something, you have to go higher than what's currently available in the world. We'll see what that means later. Okay? But that's a general idea, that I had a negative quality, and I have to change its context, and then suddenly it makes sense. If we would see the beginning at the end at the beginning, then it might be that it would even be easier to go through the whole process, but we can't. We can only see suddenly.
It's like seeing the tapestry, like the other side of the whole plan.
Right. So, if you really want to get into it, the Torah is that way. The Torah tells us that you don't have to read it just linearly, but rather na'ut safam b'tchilatam, that the end is wedged in the beginning. Wedged in the beginning. It's connected back to the beginning. But that requires a certain elevation of in a certain sense, a therapist has to think that way. You have to be able to connect the end into the beginning and see how they really do connect. That they even feed each other. It becomes like a loop. We said that that's the reason that we are so fond in Yiddishkeit of recalling Yetziat Mitzrayim every day and every hour and every mitzvah and everything that we do. Like everything is Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim. Everything teaches us to connect the beginning back into where we are, into our end, where we are right now. Is to create that loop. That loop becomes very important. So the Torah also has a non-linear way of thinking about things. But as human beings, we have to go through a linear progression that in the end allows us to connect the end back into the beginning. So we can't skip. We don't know how to skip. And no matter what we'll do, we won't be able to see the end before we get there. But once we have reached a certain end, it's up to us to connect it back to the beginning. That's the real sweetening. And when you're able to, so like we say here that sweetening has at least 2 stages. Really it has 3, like we'll see. That it itself has submission, separation, and sweetening. But the final result is, like the Rebbe used to say, Otcha Hashem ki anafta bi. That I can thank you, Hashem, for having been so harsh with me. Why can I thank you? Because I know how to connect the end back into the beginning. If I don't know how to connect the end back into the beginning, then really it makes no sense to me. Then really I remain just with my one-time linear progression through life, and I don't know how this all led to where I am right now. And not only that, I don't know how right now I'm feeding again my older self, my younger self, my less experienced self, and so on. The one that needs the strength that I have now. In the Tuesday classes, we're now talking about bringing the future into the present, which is a little bit of the same idea of trying to see the end at the beginning. But there we explained it, that sometimes I don't have enough strength right now to get through what I need to get through. So I have to have a mechanism in my psyche to be able to tap into the future and take from it. In the Torah, that's the mitzvah to make a vow on performing mitzvot. Vishmot Yishaveh. You should make a vow in Hashem's name. Say Chazal, why does it say it twice? Mikan shenishba'in ala mitzvot. It says Vishmot Yishaveh twice in Sefer Dvarim. The second time it says, well, we already heard it once. What does it teach? It teaches us that the vow is like a mechanism that allows me to take strength from the future and bring it into the present. And then, even if I'm bankrupt right now, I have the ability, or not bankrupt, but even if I just don't have enough energy to perform something, but I want to do it, so I can borrow, as it were, from the future. By the way, that's the whole concept of Shabbos. So the whole Shabbos is borrowing from the future, okay? Because it's me'ein olam haba. The whole Shabbos is like a future state, and we have this thing, levu alai v'ani poreah. Hashem says, for Shabbos you can, it becomes even monetary, that you can borrow money in order to pay for the Shabbos expenses. Why? Because you really are borrowing from the future. Who's going to repay it? In the future, it's not you that's repaying. In the future, it's the final state. It's Hashem who's repaying it.
Can you just say you're borrowing from essence? Why do you have to make it a time bound?
Because for me, because I'm linear. So for me, it's a time bound.
You really are borrowing from essence. That's all.
And much more than that, because I don't. If I had this in my essence right now, it should also manifest either as psychological strength. It should manifest as wealth. It should manifest in many ways. It means that my essence is not yet in that future state. And what?
I mean, it's fullness. It's not really future. Okay, fine.
But it's a future.
As a human, it's future.
Atid is like also in Hebrew. Atid lavo really means that it is waiting there. Right? That's the meaning in Hebrew. In English, in English, it's a little bit harder to hear in the future the sense of something that already exists. Mm-hmm. And it's true, because we want to retain free will. If we want to retain free will, there has to be a sense that the future is yet unknown. That everything can be seen, but the will is free, and we're able to choose.
I'm not getting how you borrow from the future if you're depleted in the present.
This is exactly what you do in a bank. You come to the bank, you say, I don't have money right now.
And they say no.
But I'll pay you. No, of course I will, because I'm taking the money now to do something
if you
worthwhile.
have the wisdom to know where to take from, then you're not stuck in a problem.
Again, if
you have the wisdom to know where to borrow from or which bank to go to, then you're not really in a problem.
Why not? You don't have, and they're giving you. He said the wisdom here is the mechanism. How do you convince them to give you?
So how are you doing that?
We also learned this, I don't know if you remember, we had this mashal that Reb Usher used to give. It's called the mashal of Shvira and Tikkun. That a very big contractor wanted to build something, but some way through it, remember this? And some way through he ran out of money. So he was very broken, he didn't know what to do, and a little child came to him and said, look, there's a place, there's a gemach, a very special gemach, that you can borrow as much as you want from. Except that to receive what they have, and they'll give you as much as you need, and without interest. Just take it. Except there's one catch. To borrow there, you have to come bidmaot shalish, it's called in Hebrew. Like really heartbroken and really crying. And if you're like that, they'll give you whatever you want. So he was very broken, and he said, so I'll go. And he cried to them, and they gave him. And he finished his construction project. And then he taught other contractors to do the same. And from this they built a great city. That was his mashal. What's the idea here? That there's always a place above where I am, but to reach it, to be able to tap into it, I have to come with a broken heart. Okay? If I have everything I need, so they don't want to talk to me.
Right, so that's okay, but I don't see how you're bringing the future. You're asking God to help your. Okay, but you're not bringing the future into the present.
By being
It's like
broken,
your future state.
by coming and saying the right
You can be more
thing.
bountiful now, but in your present you're not bountiful.
Yeah, so you're not doing it. God's
It's
doing
not.
it.
No, because without you coming to ask, without you making a vow, let's say, the way the Chazal say it, then the future is not going to enter into the present. There's an action you have to do.
There's the story of.
And what are the details of it besides
Exactly. So
praying?
not praying. It's not praying at all. It's
Uh,
coming with a broken
being
heart.
broken.
Yeah,
Don't
coming
pray.
asking with a broken heart.
Let's have that.
Asking is not praying.
It's more than achna. You're right in essence. It's a type of achna. But in achna'ah, we've never talked about the fact that the person has to break down crying. Okay? There's a certain state here, which is, I really by myself can't do anything. Real shiflut. That I'm really a Messiah Shein Bo Mamash.
Isn't it just called ultimate of
You
Chachma?
can say that it's the ultimate state, but we really haven't talked about it in the sense of breaking down and crying. Meaning, again, it's not a crying because I'm in despair in the sense that nothing will ever work. On the contrary, I very much want to do. I'm not in despair in the sense that I don't want to continue my work. I do. But I'm unable because I don't have really whose is everything. Everything is Hashem. So if I don't come with the feeling of I'm crying for it, I require what you have to give me, then he really doesn't want to give it.
It's like confident but unable.
Right.
Is it what we were also asking talking about the last time I was here, feeling that lack of.
What are you
knowing how to
lacking?
lack
for what you
and then asking for it, like
Good.
acknowledging that.
You have to acknowledge very strongly what you lack. I told you that was something that for me changed a lot of things.
Have you
When
been
I-
using it?
My wife has been using it,
Anya,
reminding
Does
me.
it mostly bring people to say, I need to pray?
When I
I need
was
to ask for help?
when I was just American, I was by a good friend who has a very similar history to my own. We went in different paths at some point, but and I told him that, and I'm still waiting to hear what happens. Like, I mean, he's been very, very, very successful, so I'm not sure like exactly where it fell on his ears.
I'm sure
But-
it did.
But I think that psychologically it did enter something, because it's like this sudden realization that I'm lacking something. That's what I should. That's the thing that's keeping, and not necessarily success or not success, whether I have it or don't have it.
Yeah, no,
It's
we
a
lack
sense of-
nothing and then we lack.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
how it is.
Maybe this is like put this in parentheses and get back to the issue of Sweden. Okay, so the separation, the submission that happened to Egypt is very similar. What was the submission?
When we make an oath, we don't feel that. You make an oath, they don't feel desperate when they borrow from the future.
So you should. That's exactly where you
So
say.
they could,
You don't feel desperate because you're still up to your own devices.
There should actually be in a desperate state. There shouldn't be in a confident state.
Should be in a recognition that I have nothing of my own. It's despair, not in the sense that I can't do. I could do a great deal, but only if I receive something from Hashem.
From a higher.
So believe that Hashem's going to do it.
It's not just believing; it's knowing how to ask. That really, I do want to do. I'm not in despair. I haven't given up at all. On the contrary, I want to do great things still.
their dilemma in front of you.
You're with me though, so I need from you. I have to come to you with
Confidence
demands.
or a feeling of lack? It seems like
Both.
It's what-
Both at the same time. It's a paradoxical state.
But that doesn't involve crying, what you just described.
It does, you would cry if you wanted something bad.
Usually when you think Hashem's going to do something,
He said it's not crying in despair. It's different.
Usually when you hear that somebody's crying, you think that they're in despair, they're miwash. But here are nothing that is miwash. He's come to the real recognition that I have nothing of my own. And when I understand that I have nothing of my own, I need to take from you, I need to borrow from you. It's not even a promissory note. I'm not even promising I can do anything with it. But I want to try. And Hashem doesn't care whether you'll succeed or not. He's interested that you come to ask from him. That is the big secret. It's that I need to borrow from the future. And with Shabbos we said, make Shabbos as wonderful as you like. But borrow it from me. Don't feel that you're borrowing from the bank. Remember we said this, the story about Rav Usher, that he suddenly received 1,000,000 shekels and he turned it down. He was building the women's, what do you call it, recuperation center. Like a bet of Ra for women after delivery. So why did he turn it down? So he explained, he said, if I take 1,000,000 shekels, what am I going to do with them? I don't need all of it now. It's going to take months until I pay the entire sum to the contractors and the people that are doing this and that, whatever, building the center. So in the meantime, I'm going to put it in the bank. And then what's going to happen? Every time I need money, I'll come to the bank and I'll ask them for the money. So they'll probably give it to him because it's in his account. But he says, I don't want to ask them. I want to ask Hashem. So he turned it down and he said, every time that I'll need, I'll ask Hashem. In some way it'll come to me. That's the main recognition that you need.
Can't a person say that?
So I don't want to get into that discussion.
Yes.
No, you could say,
If
Hashem gave
Rabusha-
me this money.
So the idea is that if Rav Usher, who's not an idiot, doesn't do it that way, then we're fooling ourselves in some way.
If what?
If Rav Usher, who wasn't an idiot, he said, no, it has to be clean in that sense.
Right.
It means that we are certainly fooling ourselves at some
Oh,
level.
we're also not on the level to do it.
At some level, we're saying, really, this is ours already. Okay? There's no feeling here of coming to ask Hashem for what I need. And that's the key, this supplication. With Mochalish. Anyway.
Remember, we
It's like the
always
Jews
talk
at the
about
sea.
Hachna and Havdalah as like linear. Like the one happens and the other happens. So we say that Breslov is Hachna and Chabad is Havdalah. But it sounds like from what you're saying that they're exactly the same, happening at exactly the same time, the flip sides of the coin.
Not exactly. We'll see in a moment. It's not. Havdalah is again to connect with my divine self, with my higher self. But that doesn't heal my lower self.
But what you were just describing
They just
now is
shunt
also
it.
Havdalah, because you're expecting Hashem to come in and do it, which is your higher self. It's exactly the other side of the coin. You can't separate them, it seems.
So, take this as an example. I don't want to analyze it right now through the whole process. But this whole example that we just said, it has in it mostly Hachna'ah. And in the Hachna'ah, there is Hachna'ah Avdalah Amtaka. That's true. But I don't want to analyze it that far right now. Because we already did that last month. Okay? So we did as much as maybe sometime we'll revisit. Okay, now, there's two processes that are going on in parallel in the parashot here. One is the Achna Avdalah Amtaka of Egypt, and one is the Achna Avdalah Amtaka of Am Yisrael. They're not exactly the same. For Am Yisrael, the Hachna'ah, when was the Hachna'ah? Was being a servant. Was being a servant in Mitzrayim. It's not exactly how we learn Tachna. Chna, we said, is to recognize the divine providence in everything that's happened to me in the past. So you can say that the main Chna that happened was when Yosef revealed himself to his brothers, and then he realized everything was orchestrated. But there's no real resolution there yet. It's not finished. But in any case, Achna, the simple way that we think of Achna is that you become lowly through this difficult thing that is bothering you. That's giving you a hard time. In this case, being a servant in Egypt.
Isn't it specifically they're crying out from being slaves?
Right. And you're crying out. You could say that they reached the Hamtaka of Achna'ah when they cried out to Hashem. When they suddenly realized this is not happening by chance. And it's interesting that they didn't cry out until Moshe Rabbeinu was 80 years old. Meaning it took 86 years until they began to cry out to Hashem and say, this is all from you.
They were high on their struggle. I don't understand. Isn't it unnatural that they should be?
No, because a person is usually, remember we talked about the negative side of taking responsibility, which is that I'm responsible. I don't have to turn to Hashem.
I'll fix it.
I'll fix it. So they thought they'll fix it. But eventually they see they can't fix it. It takes time until a person realizes that this is really too hard. Not because you can't fix it, but because I need Hashem to fix it. He has to learn how to turn to Hashem. And that takes time. So really, the process of Achna is pretty long. In the context of the whole nation, it's a long process.
And in the context of us,
It's also long, but it's not that long. Hopefully it's not 80 years. What?
So you get to
can we speed it up without Hashem torturing us?
Can we?
Speed it up without Hashem torturing us.
Be vulnerable fast.
If you understand right away that any kind of difficulty that you're going through is for you to call very quickly. You have to come to that recognition right away. That if there's a difficulty here, it means Hashem wants me to pray to Him. That's the Breslov way of praying. That whatever difficulty comes up in my life, the way that the first thing that I do is I turn to Hashem.
Basically, become restless for a year.
What?
Become restless for a year. And then
No, you don't have to for a year. It's even for a moment. Whenever it happens, don't wait. Don't try to solve it. Right away, turn to Hashem. It didn't do anything. You said it means that I don't yet understand how this is from Hashem. I still think of Hashem as some kind of a mommy I'm running to every time I fall down. No. I have to understand that what happened here is from Hashem. That's why I'm turning to Him. And He orchestrated it. And if I don't understand that it's from Him in the first place, Hashem is just an escape hatch. That's not Hashem. That's just like, again, me serving my needs. But really, Hashem put me in this place because He wants me to turn to Him. So turning to Him means acknowledging that everything is Him. That's achna. That's real lowliness. Yeah. So it took them a long time. The next stage of Havdalah, for them, what was Havdalah for the Egyptians was achna. What was separation for the Jews became the submission for the Egyptians. How so? So I don't want to get now into the sugya of what happened in the first three Makos. The first three plagues, according to the pshat of what the Torah tells us, they occurred equally in Goshen and in Egypt. There was no separation. In fact, there's even a sikha from the Rebbe about the whole story with the blood that we're so familiar with. That if a Jew would take the water out of the Nile, it would be water, and if the Egyptian, it would be blood, and if he even drank from the same cup, he was drinking water. The Rebbe makes a big point about the fact that Rashi never brings this medrash. He doesn't, because it's not the pshat. The pshat is that they suffered equally from the first three plagues. It's very interesting what this was exactly. you could say that in terms of the Jewish people, this was an understanding that it is Hashem who's running the show. They had to come to this understanding also, even though they had already been crying to Hashem. So I don't want to get into that whole shirhada. The pshat, the way we see it in general, and without getting into too much detail, is that what happened to the Jewish people was that they were separated out. And they felt suddenly that I'm different. That I'm not the same as the Egyptians.
Only at the fourth Makkah.
So again, from the pshat it looks from the fourth one. But I'm saying in general, the whole thing of the makot was to separate them out. And to reveal to them that they have a divine essence that is keeping them safe from everything that's going on here. But they're not plagued by it. For the Egyptians, this was submission. And it's not even submission in the easy sense. It's not just submission of recognizing it. Because we said, Pharaoh, in the beginning, he doesn't know who God is. Who is this God? I've never heard of him. He's in the worst state of not being able to relate to Hashem. Eventually, what was he supposed to do? He was supposed to listen to his people, because his people figured it out before he did. Because
They didn't think they were God like him.
right, they didn't have the ego
Yeah.
so inflated the way that
Not
his
to that
was.
degree.
And so they caught on to it earlier. And they already were telling him, "Aterem tedaki avda Mitzrayim." Don't you know that Mitzrayim was lost already? Why are you continuing with that? And by the sixth Makkah, they figured this out. But he wouldn't listen to them. By the way, this is a sugya in and of itself, which relates to politics. How much should a leader listen to his people? Let's put it aside. At the end, the separation becomes so complete that you would hope that they would be able to understand that they don't need to run away from Egypt. Meaning, once the separation has done its work, you're no longer afraid of the negative qualities that you have. And like the example of all the examples I always give about a diet, or an alcoholic who's recovered. You don't have to fear the alcohol anymore, because you're so way beyond it.
In reality, that's almost never the case.
Because there's no building up, because we said there's no real separation going. It's all achnal, it's just submission.
Yeah.
It's submission, which is good. You come to a place where you call onto what they call a higher power and so on. And
Figured it out, that's all.
what?
They don't see that it's necessary to bring it back in. That's all.
It's not necessary to bring them back in.
Well,
It
we
comes
do
in
get
by
to
itself.
make it in.
It comes in by itself. You have to reach the state where it's no longer a threat to you.
They tell you don't go there.
Said it? Because they're afraid of it.
Sounds like what you're saying is that in the last Makkah was something the Jewish people didn't experience properly, that it didn't.
Not just the
Why
last
does
one.
Havdalah impact you properly enough that you can heal if you experience Havdalah fully? Right? They weren't present in Makkah Choshech, like what? What was it? It sounds like they didn't feel the separation.
So we said differently. We said that right away, even before they left Mitzrayim, before the last Makkah, before Makat Bechorot, they already received mitzvot. It's not just mitzvot. If you remember how we learned it in Munav Bitachon, the first mitzvah, Chodesh Hazeh Lachem, is meant to give us the feeling of Man Malchei Rabbanan. It's to give us the feeling that who is the master of reality, of nature? Somebody who learns Torah. That he can say the exact moment when the new moon is born, which is impossible to calculate. You can only approximate it in calculation, but you can't see it. because it's what we call a three-body problem in physics, which is unsolvable. It's more than three-body problem, really. Because three bodies are the sun, the moon, and the earth. But really, Jupiter is also exerting influence, gravitational influence, and so are other planets. But in general, it's just called a three-body problem, and it's unsolvable. There's no way you can perfectly determine when the new moon will be seen. But you can come close enough. Close enough for the servant of God to come out and say the exact moment. But you need to do some work before. But then, in the end, the strength that comes out of the mitzvah, that's what allows you, in the end, to say when the exact moment of the molad is. To say mikudash at the right time. To say it's sanctified at the right time. It's the same thing with everything. That's the essence of confidence in God. So we already received that mitzvah before. It's not the mitzvah, you could say the mitzvah that empowers you to sweeten, if you want. To be the master of it. Not to master the difficulties. To master the inaccuracies. To master the shortcomings. To take them to a whole new level. They received that before Makat Bechorot. They received it 14 days before. On Rosh Chodesh Nisan.
You didn't accept it?
It didn't have the impact that it should, meaning it didn't sweeten for some reason.
For some reason.
The some reason is, as we'll see, that to sweeten properly, you have to be willing to elevate to a new level. Meaning, if until now you've been a servant of the Egyptians, to sweeten being a slave, being a servant, you have to be willing to elevate your service to a whole new level. Then instead of being a servant of the Egyptians, who are the lowest people, I become a servant of God, which is the highest.
Tired of service.
Yeah. You can.
They need a break. But they didn't have that understanding yet, so they couldn't be sweet.
So,
It
but
wasn't that
Moshe Rabbeinu was
wasn't
there.
given to them yet.
Maybe, but that was the purpose. That was the kavanah of the whole thing. God's
I just
intent
sound
was.
like I'm not speaking out against God's form of sending us healing, but usually on some level, if the therapist can't bring the client to it, the therapist has to ask himself, what did I not, what did I miss?
As a therapist, we have to be very
So
careful to see that you are presenting something that the person can accept.
So why do you go do that? Yeah, why
He
not
did.
do that?
He did,
Like if
but
a
it didn't
teacher,
work. Moshe Rabbeinu
everyone
went
fails
through
a
it.
test, usually then the teacher knows the test was too
I'll
hard.
give you an example. How do I know that that's what Hashem intended? Because when they eventually came to Yam Suf, to the Red Sea, what were they supposed to have done? Walk through. That's what they did in the end anyway. Except that it should have happened without Moshe having to show them, I'm raising my staff, and here the waters are parting. We know that there's like a discrepancy. On the one hand, they get stuck and nobody can move. On the other hand, the Medrash tells us that Nachshon ben Aminadav, he went in.
he was a better vessel, so he healed
Oh,
faster.
so he was able to sweeten the service that he had done in Mitzrayim. By the way, he's Yehuda. He's not Levi, so he was a servant. He's a servant. He was a slave. But he caught on to it. And understand that he understood that now that I'm a servant of Hashem, the whole point of the exercise, if you want to call it that, was to give me power, dominion over nature. And so when I walk into the waters, they're going to part. He reached that sweetening stage. He understood that that's what Hashem had given him.
But God's therapy wasn't very individualized, because only some people could handle it.
But that's
the
truth.
nature of reality. When you're dealing with masses, you have examples of people that have healed, and they try to heal the others.
So there
That's
was,
how it
he
works.
knew he would fail. So
No, he
No,
knew some would pick it
don't
up.
call it.
the people who would help us in the future.
There are some people that are able to catch on to this quickly, and there are those that it takes more time.
It's you now. Myself, that's the
And you could say that we're all remnants of those that didn't get it.
Why are we not showing that in the Bible?
Because we're still saying Zechar L'Yetziat Mitzrayim. We're still here. We're still going through the whole thing. If you're done, you're done. If you understood this, you understood this. Okay? So,
So it wouldn't be in this world.
wouldn't be in this class.
Or we would be the tzaddik, I'm saying,
Maybe you are.
no, I'm saying.
So in this generation, if you're zoche to hear Chassidus and you're zoche to hear this, so what are you? You're the Nachshon. That's what you are. You're the Nachshon ben Aminadav of this generation.
Why? Maybe because we're not the
I thought we're the unwell ones.
Just told you we're not done.
In relation to all the generations,
in this generation
yes.
we're like the Nachshon.
Okay.
Right.
This whole generation is like the leftovers.
We're not sure.
But within the generations, that's what the Rebbe kept telling you. The people that are zoche to hear,
Hasidus is everywhere, though.
That's
They
so
don't even
hard.
know it.
that I unfortunately, even though we're putting it now on Facebook, I'm not sure that it's everywhere. These teachings I'm not sure are everywhere yet. This is going to take more time. But the people who heard this, who heard it from the Rebbe, who heard it from the Rav, and so on, and they hear this, then I think it puts them in a different place in relation to their
Only
shortcomings.
when they're ready to go.
Is that it?
What
Is
did
that
you say?
Only when they're
Is
ready
that
to
it?
go.
You see that even there, Hashem didn't do it the day they
Go
walked
before they're
walked
ready,
out.
I'll tell you
It took
that.
6 days. It took them 6 days to come to the Red Sea and to see whether they had integrated this knowledge to be able to walk straight through the waters. This process takes time. It's not something that will happen just overnight. Okay?
It's not just supposed to come tomorrow.
So hold on. And now, what happens with all the other people that are not Nachshon? That in the
I
end,
have ideas.
they saw Nachshon and something clicked probably, but it wasn't. It's too late. That situation was over. So they didn't get it. They didn't understand. What did Nachshon do that we didn't do? Why was Nachshon able to walk in?
Brave, like what is
Yeah,
it?
they'd say he's brave, he's courageous, he's this, he's that. That's not what he was. What did he do?
He's a thrill seeker.
He became a servant of Hashem. That's what he did. He took
He didn't use
his
own
slavery, he took his negative experience, his negative state of mind, which was to be a slave of the Egyptians, and he transformed it into a state of serving God. That I'm a slave, a servant of Hashem. Eved Hashem. Even though I'm a son, I've been told all my life, I'm a son of Hashem. Banim atem Hashem Elokechem. Still, there's a higher state. We said this is one of the main things that the Rebbe Rashab discusses in Samach Vav, of a ben shenasa eved. We said, well, that's what we say on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, im kebanim, im ke'avadim. Whether as sons, as children, whether as servants. So even though you're a son of Hashem, meaning that you have the capacity to learn Torah, that's what it literally means. To be a son of Hashem means to have the capacity, the koach hamaskil, the ability to learn Torah. Still, I approach my relationship with Him, with God, as if I'm His servant. We said that's a very big deal. It's a big switch in a person's mind. Because it says in general that a son cannot be a servant to his father. He has to choose it, and not just choose it, he has to work hard on it. Because with being a son come all these privileges, and this inability to serve my father. That's what Jews in general feel today. Yeah? Very entitled. Which is okay, it's not wrong. There's nothing wrong about it. But it's not the highest level. The highest level is when you realize that the fact that I'm Hashem's son, that I'm His child, that I'm able to study and learn His Torah, is for me to serve Him. Not for me to entitle myself and put a crown on my head. And what does it mean to serve Him? To bring His Torah to everybody. To fix the world, all these things that I need to do. It only comes through Torah. It's not...
But you must be first the son to then become the servant.
Otherwise-
You can't skip that stage.
If you're not the son, and you're just a servant, that's like a non-Jew. So it's also a very high level.
No, but a convert moves from being
You are a son because
servant
you're
just
Jewish.
a son to servant.
Yeah, by default.
Like he's servant before he's son.
Maybe he has the servant built in. In any case,
There are Torah learning criteria.
wait. There was the main thing. We're not going to finish on that. The problem is, though, that we said that not everybody understood this about Nachshon. They didn't get this. They thought he was maybe courageous. Maybe he was, more strongly willed than they were. His ability to walk into the water.
Who said Hashem wanted them to walk through the water?
That's what he says. The Bel Bnei Israel. V'yisau. What? Mati tzakelai. What do you? This is not the time to call out to me.
That's after.
What do you mean, not the time? When were you supposed to call out to me? In Achna. That's when you learn how to call out to me. That's when you learn how to tap into me. But now and all the more so, maybe not in the sense of tzedakah, but in the sense of becoming one with Hashem in Havdalah, in separation. But when you come to sweetening, that's not the time to call out to me. That's not what it's about.
Maybe wait and he'll send rafts. I mean, say what's to do.
I'm not telling him how to do it, but I know what needs to be done. That I have dominion over nature. That I have dominion over my life. I have dominion over my mission in this world. So, Malia's watching us from somewhere else. I can tell.
We should all click in.
No. No, because it will take bandwidth from the thing. Anyway. I'm conserving bandwidth. I should have the bandwidth meter here for my friend Golan who's watching. Should have a nice bandwidth meter here telling me how many megabits per second are still available and how many people can watch it here in this room. Anyway, so that's what they didn't get about Nachshon, and what we still don't maybe understand fully about Nachshon is this his understanding Man Malchei Rabbanan, that he's the master. Why? Because he became the servant of God. He's the master of the universe. And again, when we translate this into therapy, this means that when you reach the stage of sweetening, it's that you've become the master who's able to take those shortcomings, the negative things that you've been carrying around, the negative experiences that you've had, and you can mold them into something different. You can change their context. But you can't do that until you come to the final stage. If you try to do it too early, then it just doesn't work. You won't have the right answer. So what? So this is very clear. It's that the servant of the Egyptians becomes the servant of God. Okay? But a lot of people didn't get this. So Hashem gives another chance. He has a second chance. I'll show you again that it's up to you. What does he do? They come out of Yam Suf, and the first location that they rest at is called Mara. Why is it called Mara? Because it said the waters there were bitter. And so they cried out to Hashem. See the same pattern.
So they're quite
There's
good.
bitter waters.
So
They're still in some kind of submission. So they cry out to Hashem. Hashem, it's not bad. At least they're crying out to Hashem. They're not.
It's the same thing they did at the Yam Suf.
Okay.
But isn't it good, according to what you're saying?
Okay, I'm saying, at least it's submission. But they don't get it yet. Don't worry if the waters are bitter. That's not. What does Hashem do? He says to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Vayoreh Hashem etz, vayashlech el hamayim vayimteku hamayim." He shows him a tree, and Moshe takes it. Moshe catches on, and he takes a branch and he throws it into the water, and the water is sweetened. And so that's the only time in the whole Chamisha Chumshei Torah that that this verb, the root of sweet, mem taf kuf matak, appears. It's only a single time. Vem teku amayim, the waters were sweetened. So this is the example of sweetening.
It's only one?
Just once in all over the Chumash. So, what happened there? What is this branch of a tree that he throws in? So Chazal, they fill the picture in for us to understand what's going on. They say that this was an olive tree. And if you know anything about an olive tree,
Throws out of rocks.
and even when you talk about its fruit, it's bitter. It's very bitter. The leaves are bitter,
And it grows out of a rock.
and it goes around. It's a bitter tree. Again, when you look at it, you look at all its creases and lines, you see that it's had a bitter life. It's not a lovable tree. You can't love them.
And it grows in hard, arid
Yeah,
land.
why? Okay.
Not backyard.
Is that
That's-
like pure life?
Exactly.
Is that before?
Exactly. No, this is the first time. So this is the first time, what Chavi just said is, we learned this in the past, that this is the, say Chazal, because Hashem heals like with like, domeh b'domeh. How does Hashem heal? How does Hashem sweeten? But that's exact. If you think about it, that's exactly what we said about servitude. It's not that you become free. You don't heal servitude with freedom, with its opposite. You heal it with its like, with its similar, with what's similar to it. So if you were a servant before, you have to become a servant now. Except that you're a servant to a higher place. He told us.
Why didn't you just tell them?
He told us.
He did?
Said that's what the Medrash says. He told us.
Tell the Yidden in Mitzrayim.
No.
You're leaving Paro to serve me.
Therapy
Then
is
you
very,
can't
therapy is
Well,
very,
that's
very
the
delicate. You have to get the person to understand this himself. You can't write it out on the page, hand it to them,
But they didn't do
and
it.
say,
They stayed in their slave psyche. They stayed there.
"Beseda," and it's good.
Already.
Why?
Well, because they needed
Because
that
all
to
you
serve
need
Hashem.
is to change the context. You have to use it in the right way.
Are we still slave in
So-
that mentality?
Again, because we still don't feel that we have
We're
dominion
not
over our
over the world
lives.
at all.
But we still feel that in the end we are
Does everybody feel?
settled. There's a Nachshon in every generation. The Rebbe was like the example of the Nachshon in our generation. Of somebody who just says,
Walk through the wall.
I can change reality. And he did.
Yeah.
I can't be the Rebbe. I don't have his none of us maybe can. But we don't have his qualities. But where we are, in the place that we are, we have to caravel time. In the place that you are, you can change the world. You don't have to go somewhere else. It doesn't matter what gifts, what faculties, what abilities Hashem gave you. The secret is to take those things that you think that for you right now are what hinder you and what pull you down, and to transform them, to sweeten them by placing them in a higher context.
You have to go to Hana first.
You can. You have to go through the whole process.
So
First
you
off,
have to
now,
actually leave them in the beginning.
no, you have to understand that these inhibitions, these problems, not inhibitions, but the opposite. What's holding me back, all the negative things that I'm carrying around, these are from Hashem. They're not by chance. That's the submission. I have to cry out to Hashem to give me understanding that this is all from Him.
Right. But in terms of alcohol
This is
addiction,
all to create the connection with Him. Then I have to put it aside for a